Greenwich Palace. The Queen of England stands in the Tower of London courtyard. Her mother kneels on the scaffold in a grey gown. "Stop!" Elizabeth screams at the guards. "I command you to stop this!" But they don't hear her. They can't hear her. The executioner raises his sword. Elizabeth runs toward the scaffold, her crown falling from her head. She is panicking like a child. "I am your queen. I am Elizabeth of England. You will obey me." The blade falls anyway. Her mother's head rolls across the straw. Elizabeth bolts upright in her bed, gasping. Sweat soaks through her silk nightgown. The candles flicker in her royal chamber. It was a dream, again. What kind of nightmare haunts the most powerful woman in Europe every single night? Why does the queen who commands armies become helpless in her sleep? Today we'll discover how a 2-year-old's trauma created 45 years of royal torment. You'll see why England's virgin queen never escaped her mother's execution, how Anne Boleyn's ghost ruled from beyond the grave, and why the woman who saved England couldn't save the one person who mattered most. Please like this video. It helps us reach more people who love the hidden emotional truths behind history's greatest figures. September 7th, 1533. England celebrates its new princess. Elizabeth enters the world as pure gold, silk cradles, pearl-sewn gowns, 100 servants who call her Your Grace. Anne Boleyn holds her red-haired daughter for the first time. "She shall be called Elizabeth," Henry VIII declares, "after my beloved mother." Anne Boleyn, the woman who fought 7 years for England's crown, finally has everything: a brilliant daughter, a loving king, a secure future. Henry VIII adores them both. He calls Elizabeth "my pearl of the world," carrying her through palace gardens. She has her father's hair, courtiers whisper admiringly, and her mother's quick mind. Anne teaches Elizabeth to read before she can walk, tracing letters on her tiny palm during court ceremonies, their secret language. At 2 years old, Elizabeth speaks in full sentences and knows every lord's name. Parliament declares her heir to England's throne. The royal family appears unbreakable, but paradise has an expiration date. Henry's eyes wandered to Jane Seymour. Anne miscarries a son. The king grows cold. On May 2nd, 1536, Anne kisses Elizabeth goodbye before attending a jousting tournament. A normal kiss, a routine farewell. Elizabeth never sees her mother alive again. The child who learned to read on her mother's lap is about to learn that love means nothing when kings change their minds. She's about to discover that being a princess won't protect her from becoming an orphan.
There was one sound Elizabeth heard on May 19th, 1536, that she would hear in nightmares for 70 years. But first, let me show you how a princess became a nobody in a single morning. May 19th, 1536, 8 a.m., Tower of London. Anne Boleyn kneels on scattered straw, wearing grey damask. "God save the king," she says, with steady voice. The French executioner's blade falls. 2 miles away, Elizabeth stacks wooden blocks in her nursery, unaware her world just ended. Within hours, servants strip her apartments. The silk gowns disappear. The golden cups vanish. Everything marking her as a princess gets packed away forever. "Where are my things going?" Elizabeth asks her governess, Lady Bryan. She can't answer. How do you tell a 2-year-old that Parliament just declared her a bastard? That her father signed papers erasing her from the succession line? That the mother she keeps asking for will never come home? "When is Mama coming back?" Elizabeth asks every day for weeks. The question hangs in the air like smoke. No one answered her. How do you explain to a child that her mother was executed for treason? But children understand more than adults think, especially genius children like Elizabeth. She hears the whispers: adulteress, witch, traitor. The servants think she's too young to understand. They're wrong. Her mother seduced the king with evil magic, the kitchen maids gossip, while Elizabeth sits nearby pretending to play with dolls. Anne Boleyn was a French spy, the guards mutter. She betrayed England. That child has cursed blood, the older courtiers say, crossing themselves when Elizabeth walks past. Every whisper burns into her memory. Every cruel word shapes her understanding of who she is. The transformation happens brutally fast. Courtiers who once bowed now ignore her completely. She's moved from royal apartments to servants' quarters. Her title disappears. She's no longer Princess Elizabeth, but just the Lady Elizabeth. Henry stops visiting entirely. The father who called her "my pearl" acts like she doesn't exist. When forced to acknowledge her, his face shows only cold disgust. She lost her mother, and with her, she lost her father as well. At 4 years old, Elizabeth makes her first survival decision. She stops asking for her parents and starts listening to everything. She learns to read expressions, to hear danger in voices, to become invisible when adults discuss her shameful parentage. Years pass in gray uncertainty. She shuffled between households like unwanted luggage. Hatfield House, Hunsdon Palace, Richmond, never staying long enough to feel safe. At age 10, she speaks 4 languages fluently, but still sleeps in servants' quarters. Scholars praise her brilliant mind, while courtiers discuss her shameful birth. In 1543, thanks to Queen Catherine Parr, Henry's Third Succession Act restores Elizabeth to the line of succession, though she remains technically illegitimate. Parliament places her third in line after Edward and Mary, but she's still branded as bastard child. Henry dies on January 28, 1547. Elizabeth is 14, an orphan with no protection, no future. Catherine Parr, Henry's widow, shows her kindness, the first motherly affection since Anne's death. Elizabeth moves into Catherine's household, finally experiencing family warmth again. But predators hunt vulnerable girls. Thomas Seymour, Catherine's new husband, enters Elizabeth's bedroom at dawn wearing only his nightgown. He cuts her black dress to ribbons while she's wearing it, his hands lingering where they shouldn't. "Just playing," he laughs, when Elizabeth tries to escape. When Catherine discovers the abuse, she doesn't protect Elizabeth. She sends the 15-year-old girl away to preserve her husband's reputation. Elizabeth learns another survival lesson. Even those who claim to love you will sacrifice you to protect themselves. Elizabeth's half-sister Mary, the daughter of Catherine of Aragon, had always carried her own scars from Henry's court. Declared a bastard when her mother was cast aside, Mary grew up watching Elizabeth's mother, Anne Boleyn, crowned in her place. She never forgave it. When she finally claimed the throne in 1553, Mary ruled with a bitterness sharpened by years of humiliation. To her, Elizabeth was more than a sister. She was the living reminder of Anne Boleyn, the woman Mary blamed for destroying her mother. For Mary, Elizabeth is a dangerous symbol, a target too tempting to ignore. Mary Tudor becomes Bloody Mary in 1553. Protestant persecution begins. Elizabeth, marked as Protestant by birth, becomes the perfect target. Thomas Wyatt's rebellion in 1554 gives Mary the excuse she needs. No evidence links Elizabeth to the plot, but evidence never mattered to Tudors seeking revenge. Armed guards drag Elizabeth to the Tower of London. She enters through Traitor's Gate, the same entrance her mother used 18 years earlier. The same stone steps, the same iron bars, the same executioner's block visible from her window. Elizabeth, now 20, sits in the exact cell where her mother spent her final weeks. She scratches words into the stone with her diamond ring. "Much suspected by me, nothing proved can be." For 2 months she waits for death. Every morning brings the possibility of execution. Every footstep in the corridor could be guards coming to escort her to the scaffold. The 3 words that poisoned her childhood, adulteress, witch, traitor, now echo in her own imprisonment, history repeating its cruelest pattern. But Elizabeth learned from her mother's mistakes. Anne fought Henry directly and lost. Elizabeth plays the political game. She converts to Catholicism publicly, writes humble letters to Mary, attends Mass, swallows her pride and her principles to survive. Every forced prayer, every fake confession, every lie she tells to stay alive chips away at her soul. Mary releases her in 1555, but the damage is done. Elizabeth has learned that survival requires betraying everything you believe in. The bastard child becomes a master manipulator. The princess who lost everything learns to trust no one. At 25 years old, she's brilliant, radiant, and completely alone. A survivor shaped by 20 years of humiliation, abandonment, and fear. But sometimes survival is just another word for victory.
Elizabeth would make one decision that transformed her from a haunted child into England's savior. But it required becoming someone her mother would barely recognize. November 17th, 1558, Hatfield House. Elizabeth sits under an oak tree reading Plato in Greek when rioters thunder into the courtyard. "Your Majesty," they call, dismounting and dropping to their knees. "Mary Tudor is dead. The bastard child is now Queen of England." Where once servants stripped her apartments, now they race to dress her in royal purple. Where once she was moved between households like luggage, now she chooses her own palaces. Where once courtiers ignored her, now they fight for her attention. The coronation procession reverses every humiliation she suffered. Through London streets, the same people who once whispered "bastard" now cheer "Long live the Queen." The child who lost her golden cradle now rides in a golden carriage. Westminster Abbey, January 15th, 1559. The crown that was stolen from her at age 2 finally touches her head. Her red hair like her father's, her dark eyes like her mother's. Yet even in triumph, her eyes are haunted. But even Elizabeth's first parliament doesn't clear the stain of her birth. That mark stayed with her until death. She takes power in another way, by outsmarting everyone around her. With the acts of supremacy and uniformity, she locks her claim tight. Everything Henry VIII took away, his daughter takes back through pure political genius. But the real victory isn't the crown, it's the power. 1588. The Spanish Armada threatens England with 130 ships. Europe's greatest naval force plans to restore Catholic rule and execute the heretic queen. Elizabeth rides to Tilbury in white armor, addressing her troops. "I have the heart and stomach of a king, and a king of England too." Now she has become the queen who commands English ships to destroy Spain's empire. Her navy obliterates the Armada. England becomes Europe's dominant power. But in her dreams, she is still the 2-year-old child who once couldn't command the Tower Guards to spare her mother. Elizabeth plays European kings like chess pieces. She promises marriage to win alliances, then breaks promises to maintain independence. The vulnerable girl becomes the spider at the center of Europe's web. Under her rule, England explodes with creativity. Shakespeare writes plays, Drake circumnavigates the globe, Raleigh explores the New World. The bastard reign becomes the age of wonders. English trade reaches every continent. London becomes Europe's financial center. The girl who once wore servants' wool now rules an empire clothed in silk and gold. Elizabeth never marries, never shares her throne, never trusts any man with power over her body or her kingdom. The scar cut into her soul when her mother was executed and when she was erased from a child's rightful place never healed. Where Thomas Seymour once exploited her vulnerability, now men beg for her favor and receive only controlled affection. Where she once faced execution for her beliefs, now she executes others who threaten her rule. Europe calls her the bastard queen in hatred.
but England calls her Good Queen Bess in love. The names meant to shame her become badges of honor. The 2-year-old who lost everything builds an empire. The teenager imprisoned in the tower becomes the monarch who never loses a war. The bastard child surpasses every legitimate heir in English history. For 45 years, Elizabeth Tudor rules with absolute authority. She controls armies, navies, parliaments, and kingdoms. She commands everything except her dreams. Because the decision that made her queen also made her prisoner. To survive, she learned to trust no one completely. To rule, she sacrificed the capacity for the one thing she lost at age 2, a mother's unconditional love. The crown gave her everything, but it couldn't give a 2-year-old back what mattered most, her mother. Every night, the most powerful woman in Europe becomes that helpless orphan again, watching her mother die while she stands frozen, unable to save her. Some victories cost more than defeats.
But even absolute power couldn't stop the nightmare that visited Elizabeth every single night for 45 years. Greenwich Palace, 1588. Elizabeth wakes screaming at 3 a.m. again. Her ladies-in-waiting rush into her chambers to find the woman who just defeated the Spanish Armada trembling like a child. "The same dream, Your Majesty?" they whisper. She never answers. How do you explain that the queen who commands Europe becomes powerless every time she closes her eyes? The dream never changes. Tower of London courtyard. Her mother kneeling in gray damask. Elizabeth running toward the scaffold, crown falling from her head. "I am your queen! You will obey me!" But the guards don't hear her 2-year-old voice. The blade falls anyway. For 45 years, the most powerful woman alive loses the same battle every night. Her courtiers notice the patterns. Elizabeth never sleeps past dawn. She refuses to let the dream replay. She keeps 20 candles burning in her bedchamber because darkness brings her mother's execution. Foreign ambassadors report that England's queen looks exhausted despite ruling the world's greatest empire. They don't understand the psychological toll. Every state dinner where Elizabeth sits in perfect control is followed by nights where she jolts awake, reaching toward a scaffold that existed decades before she had any power to stop it. Every triumphant speech where she commands thousands of men is haunted by the memory of her tiny voice that commanded no one. The irony destroys her. She became everything her mother wanted: brilliant, powerful, Protestant, victorious. Yet in her dreams, Anne Boleyn still dies while Elizabeth stands helpless. Elizabeth keeps one secret from her entire court. Hidden in her coronation ring lies a miniature portrait of Anne Boleyn's face. For 45 years, she carries her mother's image while never officially clearing her name. The daughter who survived by forgetting publicly remembers everything privately. The guilt reveals itself in strange ways. She refuses to execute any woman on Tower Green, the exact spot where Anne died. She renovated the chapel at the tower for all departed souls, though it never names which soul it means. She bans French executioners from English soil. At her writing desk, Elizabeth drafts letters she never sends. "Dearest mother, I saved England. I kept your faith. I became the queen you died for. Why doesn't it feel like victory?" The woman who conquered Spanish kings cannot conquer the 2-year-old inside her who still believes she should have been strong enough to save her mother. Some crowns weigh more than gold. Some victories cost more than defeats. March 24th, 1603. Richmond Palace. Contemporary accounts reveal Elizabeth's desperate final act of clinging to the symbols of a love she lost at age 2. According to Giovanni Scaramelli, the Venetian ambassador, Elizabeth's final months showed an obsession with her appearance that puzzled the court. She insisted on full royal regalia, even when physically unable to bear the weight. Most striking, Scaramelli noted, was that the Queen was absolutely covered in pearls, hundreds of them sewn onto her gowns, woven into her hair, draped around her neck. Pearls, the same jewels Henry VIII once associated with his Pearl of the World, his pet name for baby Elizabeth, before Anne Boleyn's execution. Historians suggest Elizabeth, facing death, surrounded herself with the only reminder of her once perfect heaven. But it was her hands that revealed the deeper obsession. Elizabeth's coronation ring, worn for 45 years, had become embedded in her swollen flesh. Court physicians had to cut it off her finger, revealing beneath it the miniature portrait of Anne Boleyn she had carried in secret her entire reign. In her last days, she refused to lie down. Her physicians begged her to rest, but Elizabeth knew what sleep brought: the same nightmare, the same helplessness. After 45 years of ruling, she could not bear to be powerless again, even in dreams. But exhaustion claims even queens. When sleep finally took her, contemporary accounts suggest something extraordinary happened. Robert Carey, her cousin, later wrote that Elizabeth's final sleep seemed peaceful for the first time in years. Her ladies-in-waiting reported she smiled in her sleep, something they had never witnessed. What historians can only speculate is that the dream came one last time, but different. Perhaps after 70 years of psychological torment, Elizabeth's mind finally granted her what she needed, not the execution scene, but reconciliation. Modern psychologists call this resolution dreams, a phenomenon where dying patients experience peaceful visions that resolve their deepest traumas. Dr. Patricia Garfield's research on deathbed dreams shows that 60% of dying patients report encounters with deceased loved ones offering forgiveness or peace. Elizabeth Tudor woke one final time. Witnesses recorded that she reached toward her severed coronation ring, where Anne Boleyn's portrait lay exposed after decades of hiding. Her last coherent words, according to her lady-in-waiting Elizabeth Southwell, were, "I did it, Mama. I became the queen you died for." Her hand fell still. The Virgin Queen died, not haunted by failure, but, if the historical accounts are accurate, finally at peace with the 2-year-old child who could never save her mother. Elizabeth I spent 45 years proving she was worthy of a crown. The evidence suggests she died finally understanding she had always been worthy of her mother's love. The little girl who couldn't save her mother became the woman who saved England. The pearls and the checkers ring prove that was always enough. What do you think? Did her pain make her England's greatest queen, or did it haunt every choice she made? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold royal stories.